Welcome to part 2. This is where I'm gonna talk about all the stuff that was in the press kit that I didn't cover in the first video. If you haven't seen my first video, please watch it first. I used the word cum chalice in it. During this video, I'll just proceed forward like it was the same video as the last one. Away! Past me. Well, character stuff was a doozy. Let's check out the choreography and movement. The first section begins with Tom Hooper saying that directing Cats is like directing a group of world-class athletes. But it's an interview with choreographer Andy Blankenbuehler. It appears that Hooper was directly influenced by Blankenbuehler's work on Hamilton, where a period of history is examined using modern dance sensibilities. Given that Cats is set in the 1930s, that checks out. The decision to explicitly set the film within the cultural context of the original poems rather than updating its setting because of the urge to modernize the choreography is a significant one in itself. Blankenbuehler talks about that being something he loved about the original choreographer Gillian Lynn's work, that she utilized contemporary dance movement to convey the story. He describes the stage show as in a category of its own when it comes to how it uses dance. I agree, though I'd ultimately argue Blankenbuehler does a more multifaceted job than Lynn did, interpreting a very classical ballet-styled narrative with modern dance language. I'm interested in Blankenbuehler's comment that he heard the soundtrack of the play before he saw it on Broadway, about 5 years before he saw it on Broadway, so that prior to seeing it, he had an image of it in his head that didn't always align with the actual content present in the show. I think that's super interesting, just because, I don't know, I guess that kind of aligns with my own experience of reading the poems and then hearing the music and then being like, some differences here. He says there's over 50 performers to choreograph. What the fuck? How many fucking cats are there? I mean, over 50, I guess, but, you know, still. We then learn about cat school, and it begins to dawn on the reader that Tom Hooper might actually be some kind of alien genius. As he says, the whole fun of the film is that it is humans playing cats. By doing it this way, we were going to see some of the best dancers in the world interpret how to be a cat. There's not much else to talk about here, except for the fact that Sarah Dowling's job title of cat movement specialist is fucking amazing and I want it. And also this cheering snippet from James Corden. I lived as a cat for about 8 weeks when I was gearing up to shoot the film. I had a litter tray next to my bed, a big scratch pole in my office, and I employed a couple people with laser pens just so I could follow them everywhere. I'll let that, you know, speak for itself. The press kit next moves on to the music, where Hooper notes Andrew Lloyd Webber's strong sense of melody, which he does have. I'm more of a Sondheim fractured orchestra fan, but admittedly Lloyd Webber's melodies are his musical strong point, though that doesn't necessarily equate with his songs being complex or interesting. In YouTuber For Harriet's review of Cats, I particularly remember her saying that the songs aren't catchy because they're good, they're catchy because they're basic. Hooper then goes on to describe the use of electronic music in 1981 as groundbreaking, which, I mean, very true, honestly. I hadn't thought of that, but it's true. In many ways, the orchestration is fantastic, and the use of live singing means that the complexities in each vocal performance are picked up in detail. But also the orchestration is kind of terrible? Like, terribly mixed. Its priorities are very skewed at points, and the use of live singing means that more imperfections are picked up than makes for good cinema. That said, I can only praise exec music producer Marius de Vries, who also did Moulin Rouge among many other things, for seemingly being such a hands-on manager when it came to finding where we needed to adapt the music to fit each actor's individual talents. I think that really comes across, and some of the changes in the stage show are clearly designed that way in order to showcase what each performer can do really well. For the section on live singing, it says, from the first frame of Cats until the very last, the actors are singing, and ain't that the bitter truth? There's some of the nitty-gritty of how the sound was recorded live. Custom-fitted in-ear monitors sound scary, but were important so they didn't fall out during the dancing. It paints a rather surreal picture of a silent set where only the eerie chorus of people pretending to be cats can be heard. I must say I hadn't actually considered this, but sound mixer Simon Hayes talks about the spontaneity that live accompaniment allows performers. They don't have a point when they have to sing. They can choose their timing based on the decisions they're making as an actor, rather than predetermined decisions that have been made by a recording track. It's super interesting. Another decision that was made during the sound production of Cats 2019 is the decision to keep the background noise in. You know, the hyper-real soundscape. I had to read Hayes' sentence, "When we hear an actor out of breath from a dance routine, there is a reality that the audience will be able to connect with because they will know what they are watching is real." But it's not real! It's technologically enhanced cat people on a film in a cinema. Like, what makes for a raw experience on stage doesn't automatically make good film. When bound by the language of cinema and the audience's understanding that what they're seeing is to a certain degree always manufactured, the filmmaker, unless they're intentionally aiming for peak Uncanny Valley, ought to be less concerned with what's a real performance and more concerned with asking this question of their creation. Within the story, which is interpreted abstractly through dance, are the cat people out of breath for a reason? If the answer is no, the audience is going to ascribe to each breathless scene the manner of other reasons they feel would make sense. Like, seriously, I know I talked about this before, but the graveyard scene, the graveyard pas de deux, is an abstract balletic representation of Victoria being introduced to the Jellicles and feeling transfixed, right? However, its use of what I shall tentatively call breath play grounds the dance as a literal occurrence in a way the dance itself doesn't, which is confusing. All I'm getting from hearing Victoria breathe more loudly than I would expect to hear someone breathe while in her narrative situation in a film is that she's horny. And everyone's horny. And I'm horny. Stop recording the fucking breathing! It's not normal to hear on film. It is jarring. It just seems to me that there's a strange form of filmic ludonarrative dissonance at play here, or perhaps merely a hypocrisy. There's a contrast between how the filmmakers are claiming to want their story constructed, through the deep metaphor of dance, music, and people pretending to be cats, versus the production aspects of how they're going about depicting that deep metaphor. Extremely literal use of sound and realistic setting to say, this is a dance performance, actually. The things that give the experiencer a realistic experience are incongruous with the things that give the experiencer the experience of a film of extremely metaphorical, it's stage musical cats. Then we come to the visual effects, which opens by calling the stage musical of its time. It appears that the production design took a long time, with Hooper, of course, adamant that reality and reason remain the priority in this film about cats that talk. I'm intrigued by the stated rationale behind the motion capture, being the fact that with the actors and dancers in motion most of the time, makeup would run and costumes and prosthetics would hinder movement, when that's just the stage show. Like, dancers are in motion on the stage. Apparently Hooper specifically wanted the hands and feet untouched. Like, no CGI on the cat people's human hands and feet, please. He was also very keen on the precision of the makeup, which, I mean, I can relate. There's only one especially noteworthy thing in the section on costumes, and it's this line from Paco Delgado, the costume designer. "This isn't the traditional film in which all of the characters have costumes." The production design section is super interesting, considering Eve Stewart was keen to immerse the viewer specifically within the vision of 1930s London that T.S. Eliot would have been writing within. Hooper describes it as the idea of Soho, coloured neons flooding into the misty London 1930s sky. I'd like to make a snide comment about that, but honestly, that's beautiful imagery. I genuinely think the sets live up to it, like. There's also an explanation here for the size inconsistency. It's the practical one that was to be expected. While the size of some objects were multiplied by 3, other things didn't look believable at that size. Solid, honestly. I've mentioned before that the inconsistent size doesn't bother me. I mean, it still doesn't. The press kit makes mention of Stewart's belief that it's vital for filmmakers to be able to live and breathe the world she creates for them. Sadly, that's something to Cats 2019's detriment. Part of the issue with the film is how soullessly immersed everyone and everything is. I fully believe that the final product we got is exactly what Tom Hooper set out to achieve. He was just too sucked into this surreal universe of mist and neon to be capable of understanding the world he'd actually created from outside its scaled up brick walls. The cinematography section is longer than most of the others, and it's a hell of a read since it continues to display that attitude of soulless immersion. Christopher Ross, the director of photography, here seems similarly persuaded, mentioning the use of handheld photography during intimate or confrontational moments, and how where the film is set helped to make this a more visceral, real story. The lighting was designed to work with the choreography as well as basic dance film decency, and it's something I do think the film does excellently. Ross says some movement looks better in a silhouette while others look better side lit. He then talks about using wide lighting that doesn't clog up a dance floor. If you're putting lights, staging light, you're gonna run out of space pretty easily. So he talks about using lighting that's placed more than 30 feet away to create an atmosphere where the audience falls in love with the character while also allowing the dancers space to shine, which can definitely be seen in action in most of the big dance numbers. There's like lighting that will spotlight certain characters while you can clearly see, or like on the stage you would have been able to clearly see, how it was lit. Apparently they made sure to constantly have an object like a trash can, a curb, or a door frame somewhere in shot at all times. This use of mise-en-scène was to remind the viewer about the geometry of environment, always contrasting recognizable objects with actors to show the way in which the viewer's eye has been scaled down. They make mention of looking at how WALL-E and Toy Story are directed. Okay, so we are the production design segment's called Large and in Charge. I'm like, why? On to a little story I call The History of Cats the Stage Musical. I'm just gonna read this one out. Throughout the history of stage and screen, great works of literature have been reinterpreted for new audiences, the baton being passed down through generations of writers, directors, performers, as they present their vision of stories that have shaped our cultural lives. Novels such as Bram Stoker's Dracula, C.S. Lewis's Alice in Wonderland, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, Tolstoy's War and Peace, and poems such as Beowulf the Wallace and Homer's The Odyssey have all found their way onto stage and screen, reimagined and represented. Like a musical score, they either express the mood of the times that we are living in, or bring something more personal to bear for the artists who are reinterpreting it. Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot is no exception. So yeah, this is the flavor text for the proverbial Cats 2019 trading card. Cats is a global phenomenon, blah blah blah. It goes on to talk about Grisabella and how her poem was thought too sad for a children's book and sat unpublished until Andrew Lloyd Webber was presented with it by Eliot's widow, Valerie. Apparently Grisabella's tragedy added depth to the whimsical world, which, not gonna lie, I kind of object to because there is depth to the rest of the poem. This bit's great too. The stage show is set among a larger-than-life junkyard playground, the Wasteland. And the Wasteland, is that what it's called in the stage show? I thought it was the junkyard. Forgive me my ignorance in these matters. And is alive with what have become globally famous feline characters, including the Rum Tum Tugger, Mr. Mistopheles, Macavity, Jenny Anydots, Old Deuteronomy, Grisabella, and Skimbleshanks. Apparently they also vie for the attentions of their wise leader. Bit of a... Yeah, I genuinely don't have much to say about this bit at all, as it kind of speaks for itself, and I'm running out of storage on my phone to film this with. I can leave you with this ominous warning. Cats has gone on to spawn an industry in the world of entertainment, but unlike other great musicals, e.g. West Side Story, Les Miserables, Evita, it had yet to be adapted for film. Until now. So as an epilogue, the rest of the press kit goes through every cast and crew member's past work. Isn't all that enlightening from a Cats specific viewpoint, though I must admit Jason Derulo's entry is hilarious. Given the rest of the writing in the press kit, it comes across as such tonal whiplash to hear like the nice posh woman I hear monologuing the whole thing in my head just say, his breakout hit Swallow has reached 913 million audio streams and 1.3 billion views on YouTube. His breakout single, What You Say, has now earned platinum status 5 times, while Talk Dirty, Want to Want Me, and Ridin' Solo, Feet 2 Chains have reached quadruple platinum status. It's similar with several of the hip-hop dancers' profiles, a little incongruous. Oh, Ian McKellen says that most recently he stars in the Tom Hooper movie of Cats for Universal, and I had no idea. This is obviously just like their resumes. So, in conclusion, the Cats 2019 press kit provides some intriguing detail as to just how Cats 2019 got made, and I've spent far too much time poking at these little intriguing details with a stick and watching them twitch a little. I shall stop.